Then if you look at top of 544, there's the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, that is. And then uh, you get a little bit of information about Sukkot, but really almost nothing, very little, very, very little. But that's probably why this is chosen for this day. And it's also used the same reading on Chol HaMoed Pesach, Shabbat. Okay, so just, but I want to explore another possible reason this morning, which has more to do with the sin of the golden calf and sort of the cycle of the holidays, particularly through the fall holidays. So let's go to, well, let's I guess start at 33:12, kind of get a running start into the text, and then move forward from there. Anybody have it?
538.
538. David, you have it? You want to read?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Moses said to the Eternal, "See, say to me, lead this people forward, but you have not made known to me whom you will send with me. Further, you have said, I have singled you out by name, and you have indeed gained my favor. Now, if I have truly gained your favor, pray let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor. Consider too that this nation is your people." And God said, "I will go in the lead and will lighten your burden." And he replied, "Unless you go in the lead, do not make us leave this place. For how shall it be known that your people have gained your favor unless you go with us, so that we may be distinguished, your people and I, from every people on the face of the earth?"
Okay, David, let's pause there for a second. So a couple things going on here. One is, and we see it in a number of places in the Torah, that Moses is kind of in crisis management mode here, right? It's another breakdown. There will be more coming, by the way, but breakdown in the covenantal relationship between the people and God. God is very upset. Moses is trying to do kind of damage control. But also he's maybe seeing the moment as an opportunity as well. You know, the old idea that every crisis has also within it an opportunity, right? And so he needs to kind of calm God down, but he's also saying, you know, maybe I can get a little bit more in terms of information that I need that will help me navigate this journey with the people and mediate the relationship between the people and God. And so it's a back and forth conversation. You know, Moses begins it and says, "Hey, you're telling me to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, fine. But if what you've been telling me is sort of is true, is honest, then I need a little bit more information from you." And the way Moses phrases it, let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor. It's a little obscure what exactly that means, but let's just leave it at that for now. And then God responds to that. And God says, okay, I will lighten your burden and go in the midst of the people. And then Moses says back to God, doesn't leave it there. Moses says back to God, okay, but we need to know that you are in our midst. Okay. So that's sort of the setup. Moses kind of lays the table there. And I think he's kind of walking gently to get to the real place he wants to go to, which is a deeper and closer relationship with God. And that's going to be kind of the next request, right? Patty, did you have a question?
you were reading my mind, but I didn't mean to raise my hand or anything. I'll ask it later.
Okay. It's amazing I could read your mind because I actually missed that day of rabbinical school. Okay, so let's see God's response now, beginning with verse 17. Let's switch readers. Someone else want to read? Okay,
Right.
great. Mary, you want to go?
Sure.
Thank you.
And the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked, for you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name. He said, Oh, let me behold your presence. And he answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name Lord, and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. But he said, You cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live. And the Lord said, See, there is a place near me. Station yourself on the rock. And as my presence passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
Okay, just a kind of fascinating exchange there, fascinating passage, and I think it's worth spending a few minutes trying to unpack it.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
is this the rock that Moses hit?
That's an interesting idea, Judy. The tradition does not, as far as I know, make that connection. But it is interesting, that there's always rocks involved, right? It's like a rock theme. But as far as I know, that's not a link that the tradition makes. Yeah. Just how do you read this? First of all, part of it is it's like the classic, the child is talking to the parent, right? And the child wants something, right? And initially the child's like kind of feeling out, is the parent in a good mood or not such a good mood, and you get a sense you think we could have ice cream later? Yeah, that's nice. Why don't we get ice cream later? Oh, and could we go, in convertible? Yeah, we can go in the convertible. It'll be fun. Oh, and then can I have a new bike? Right? You kind of and so that's a little bit like Moses is sort of building, request, and maybe getting to the heart of what he really wants, which seems to me is this just kind of deeper sense of what God is, and maybe a more personal and intimate moment with God here. But
And doesn't that seem rather bold of Moses, considering that he was, as we have discussed many times, so hesitant to be the one chosen, and now he's like stepping up a little bit, and he's asking these things and really presenting himself.
Yeah, no, I think, I think partially that's Moses's growth over time, which we do see. Let's see who's.
But for me, it's like God is I can't think of the word. When you place human characteristics,
Anthropomorphization.
that
I was just thinking that too.
that's
Yeah,
what I
what
was
about it?
thinking,
What
too.
about that, Patty?
Well, that's not what God's supposed to be, like in the form of a man, like my hand and my back, and he's making it very human-like.
Yeah, so the anthropomorphic stuff, which you see more in Genesis and Exodus, and much less in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. Partially, it's just about the author's attempt to use human language and human images and human thought to try to describe these events and to describe God. It's sort of the tool that you have available. So that's what you have to use. Very early on in the tradition, certainly by the time of Deuteronomy, I think they really so that's already Torahitic, right? They really began to understand God as being incorporeal, meaning bodiless, no physical qualities at all. But here, still using that imagery somewhat. There's a wonderful midrash about this passage. So you're seeing the front and seeing the back. You know, it's like I think Moses, given the choice, would say, "Can I see the front?" And God doesn't even get to that point, sort of cuts that conversation off and says, "Okay, if this is going to happen, here's how it's going to happen." Like that's it. End of conversation. And the part of me that you will see is my back. And the Midrash says that what did Moses actually see? Moses saw the back of God's head. It's very anthropomorphic, and that God was wearing tefillin. And so Moses saw the back of the tefillin. There's a special knot called a daled knot. It's in the shape of a daled, made out of the leather straps, and says that's what Moses saw, the daled knot on the back of God's head. Gail, did you have something you wanted to ask about?
Yeah, this is so fascinating because I was thinking, Moses has a very long relationship by now with God. They've had an extraordinary closeness and communication. And at some point I had marked on page 538 this sentence about of course, this isn't exactly in order, but when Moses goes into the tent of meeting, the cloud descends. This is Exodus 33, verse 10. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, panim el panim, as one man speaks to another, and then he would return to the camp. And that, that pasuk, that really troubled me because I took it as metaphorical, especially because in the scene we're looking at right now, God says, you can't look at me directly or you'll die. So, how do the commentators interpret face to face here in
Yeah.
verse 15?
Right. Now, I mean, generally it's understood as just sort of like a, not literally, but as a kind of special, a higher level of communication and intimacy. In other words, it's a way of saying that Moses communicates with God in a way that no other person does. It's sort of like saying that.
Thank you.
Yeah. But so it's interesting, Gail, that you talk about order. It does seem to be a little disruptive. The beginning of 33, and then jumping into this kind of alternate narrative with verse 12. Not uncommon that you see that in the Torah, but it's a little disjointed in how it comes across, because you might expect that this whole conversation with God and Moses and the seeing of God's special presence or whatever would precede the Torah saying that God and Moses spoke in that intimate kind of way. But it happens the other way around. The other thing is, what is it that Moses is seeing? And if you look on verse 22, where it says in the English, as my presence passes by. Well, what is God's presence? What does that mean? The Hebrew is v'haya ba'avor kivodi. That's the word that they're translating as presence. Kivodi.
Kavod.
Yeah, it's kavod, right? Which we would translate as like honor. Kaved, the same root, means heavy, like weighty, literally weighty. So it's also unclear what that really means. It's commonly understood as being sort of essence, something sort of at the core of God's being, that most people would not know about or have access to, like the essence of what God is. Kivodi. The D is possessive first person, right? So kavod is the word. And part of what makes the passage so provocative is the ambiguity of it, right? Any other thoughts on that? And then I want to.
It's also just beautiful writing. I mean, the image of the cliff. He's putting him in a cleft of a rock. He didn't just say turn around. It's very graphic. It's very visual. It's really magnificent.
It is beautiful, and also, it's there is a kind of a real sort of tenderness to it in a way. And God says, "I'm going to put you here, and it's protective." And then God says, "And I'm going to shield you, with my hand." Again, anthropomorphic, but God in some way shields Moses so that Moses can experience this moment in safety and security, a moment that might be, you might expect it to be fearful, but it doesn't seem that way at all. Yeah. David, yeah.
Thank you. And I would just, Gail, you were reading my mind when you made your comment. I think at this point in time, Moses and God have been together for a year. His revelation at the burning bush, and then the months that followed during the 10 plagues, then the Exodus, and now they're in the wilderness it's been a few months. And Moses is still saying, let me know your ways after a year together. I think it for sure humanizes Moses that he's just a man and he's trying to understand. It's amazingly written in just these 2 paragraphs.
Well, and David, I think along those lines also that, to your point, that Moses is X amount of time into this whole process, and maybe Moses has realized that the information that he had that enabled him to commit to the process initially is no longer sufficient, right? That he said, when I got into this, I knew X, Y, and Z, and knowing that, I said, okay, like I'll go forward reluctantly, but I did. Okay, and now knowing X, Y, and Z, I'm saying that's not enough for me to continue. I need more. I need more. And God acquiesces to that. God says, okay, all right. It's also interesting. I mean, again, this is post Golden Calf, and it's a little bit of Moses, again, kind of talking God down off the ledge, but also God saying maybe back to Moses, you know what? I know that you're hurting right now. And let me give you something that I hope will help you to feel healed. And that's represented in that interaction. Okay, let's get into chapter 34. And who's the host here? Eileen, you're the host. So I can share my screen, right?
I let you share your screen.
All right. You don't know what I'm going to share yet, though. But so let's just read. I want to read about 7 verses into 34. Who's got that? Didn't read yet.
All right.
Eileen, you want to go? Great.
The Lord said to Moses, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of this mountain.
So just hold on one sec. So part of the tikkun, the fixing of the sort of rift that's been created by the Golden Calf incident is that you need a new contract. The old contract the old contract was ripped up literally, right? Moses had the original tablets. That was the contract. Now they're shattered. So you need a new contract. So you got to take care of business. Like if you're going through your checklist, that's one of the things you have to do. And here we're going to kind of see that will happen. The difference, of course, long noted by commentators, is that the original set of tablets are created only by God's hand. Etzba Elohim is the Hebrew language, the finger of God. And here there's a joint process where Moses and God sort of work together. And so there's human input or human action involved in the creation of the second set of tablets. And there's an idea sort of it floats around in the commentaries that this is an indication that that God's presence comes into the world when human beings create space for that, right? And so Moses being involved with the process, it's a way of sort of creating space for God. Okay, so let's keep trucking there. Eileen, you want to keep going?
So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning he went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. The Lord came down in a cloud. He stood with him there and proclaimed the name Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and the 4th generations.
Okay, all right. Let's well, I'll tell you what, read 2 more verses, Eileen. Go ahead.
Moses hastened to bow low to the ground in homage and said, if I have gained your favor, O Lord, pray, let the Lord go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people. Harden our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own.
Okay. Okay. So I want to look over at the Hebrew of a couple of these verses. Let's start with verse 6. I'll read the Hebrew. Vayavor Adonai al panav vayikra. So vayavor Adonai al panav, God avar passed before panav Moses. Moses's face but it's sort of a metaphor saying passed before Moses. Vayikra, and then God called out the following: Adonai Adonai el rachum v'chanun, erech hapayim v'rav chesed v'emet. Notzer chesed lalafim nosei avon b'fesha v'chata'a v'nakeh. And then it continues, lo yinakeh poked avon, etc. So I heard someone humming along. And was that you, Marl? So what is it? Where is this from?
Well, it's used in a high holiday service. And then, of course, the passage at the last passage that Eileen read as well, pardon our iniquity, our sins. So this was used, just pulled right out of here for Yom Tov, for liturgy.
Yes, so both this passage, the Adonai Adonai el rachum v'chanun, and that last little snippet of verse 9, V'salachta la'avonenu u'lechatatenu u'nechaltanu. That little snippet too are plucked right out of the Torah text here and inserted into the Machzor. Where does it come up in the Machzor?
Before the confessional.
Yes, very good, Morel. Exactly. So it is not found in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, but in the Yom Kippur liturgy, it is repeated over and over and over again, starting with the weird sort of Slichot section on Kol Nidre Eve, and then all the way through the rest of the day. This is called the Shalosh Esrei Midot. Okay, that's sort of the rabbinic code name for this passage. Shalosh Esrei Midot, the 13 attributes of God. And there are rabbinic commentaries about parsing out what are the 13 attributes that you find in the passage. You have to be a little bit creative to kind of get to 13. But like that God is Rachum, merciful. That's one, and then they identify others as well. But the question is, why, what is it about this passage that is compelling to the sages so that they decide to put it into the liturgy on Yom Kippur Day, and not only put it in, but to repeat it over and over and over again? That's the question. So let's first take a look in the Machzor, just so you see it. as it comes up in the Machzor. All right, I've got that. So here it is. And this sort of typical Machzor language. Again, we see so many different metaphors for God used in the Machzor, but king is a primary one. And El Melech, they say Almighty King, but it's like saying God King. Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim, sitting on the throne of mercy. All right. Merle, can you see that? You want to just read through there?
Sure. I'll make it larger. Almighty King who sits on the throne of mercy, governs with kindness, forgives the iniquities of his people. He removes their sins one by one, increasing forgiveness to sinners, pardon to transgressors, acting righteously. Wait a minute, I made it too large. Acting righteously with all who are of flesh and spirit, not according to their wickedness does he repay them. Almighty, you instructed us to recite the 13 divine attributes, and remember unto us this day the covenant of 13 divine attributes, as you made them known to the humble Moshe of old. Did you want me to stop, Rabbi?
Keep going, just to the end of the passage.
As it is written, and Adonai descended in the cloud and stood with him there. Oops, 1 second. I just lost it. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. And stood with him there and proclaimed the name Adonai.
Adonai, yeah. So you see, that's the passage right out of the Torah that we've been looking at. In this series of interactions between Moses and God. And so here in the liturgy, the liturgy, or maybe the liturgist, begins to position this passage from the Torah, and particularly the Shalosh Esrei Midot, that Adonai, Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun verse, as some kind of, especially appointed text that is to be used when forgiveness is required. Okay? It almost becomes like a kind of magic formula. Here is the Hebrew Shalosh Esrei. That's like a code word for that whole passage, Adonai, Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun. And then if we move forward, Vaya'avor Adonai al panav vayikra. So that's straight out of the Torah, what we just read. And then here's the passage, Adonai, Adonai el Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Hapayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet. You can see the whole passage. And then the translator may be sort of trying to enumerate some of the 13 qualities. Again, it's a little bit dicey sometimes, but that's how they understand it. And then, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. So pardon us because we have sinned. Mechal lanu malkenu ki fashanu means the same thing. Pardon us because we have sinned. Ki ata Adonai tov v'salach v'rav chesed l'chol kor'echa. All language that's being drawn from this passage in the Torah. And then, as you read down further, you're going to get into, as Merle pointed out, the Asham news will come. Is sort of leading right into the Asham news. And then you're going to get the Al-Chetz after that. But they precede both the Ashamnu and Al-Chet passages with this Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, and pointing our minds, if you will, back to the Torah passage here from Exodus 34, that they understand in this context of forgiveness. And the forgiveness is indicated in the rabbinic mind by that Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun phrase. Okay. And there's one other reason why. So we'll get to another reason why it comes up and why it gets connected with the Yom Kippur period. But I'm going to pause there and just any questions or comments.
Well, it's quite encouraging. I mean, to those of us who have gone off derek or who have strayed, the idea that God is there waiting to forgive us and to welcome us back if we do the three things that we're supposed to do.
What are those three things?
Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah.
Okay. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, coming from Unetana Toka. So let's put just one more sort of fine point on this. This is now a Talmudic text that I'll show you. Comes from Tractate Rosh Hashanah. And so here's our verse from Exodus 34:6, right out of that section of Torah that we've been looking at. Vayavor Adonai al panav vayikra. It's the verse that immediately precedes the 13 midot, shalosh esrei, that Adonai al rachum v'chanun phrase. And then Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, were it not explicitly written in the verse, it would be impossible to say this, as it would be insulting to God's honor. The verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, blessed be God, wrapped God's self in a prayer shawl, talit, like a prayer leader, and showed Moses the structure of the order of the prayer. God said to Moses, whenever the Jewish people sin, let them act before me in accordance with this order. What that means is, let them recite Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, right? And what will happen? Ani mochel lahem. I will forgive them. I will forgive them. So one of the things that's amazing about this is that, very early, relatively early in the Talmudic period, they had that structure already incorporated into the liturgy for the High Holy Days, for Yom Kippur. And the Talmudic rabbis felt that they could kind of anchor that into this Torah story about Moses and God and the people, and the great sin, which is the Egel HaZahav. And I think part of what's going on is, you say, if God forgave the people from that, right? For me, like, all I did was cheat on my taxes or whatever, and surely I can be forgiven for my faults and my frailties. And the reminder that God forgave the people for the sin of the golden calf is Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanu. So we say it right before the Ashamnus and the Al-Chetz as a way of saying, okay, we're going to now recite all these sins that we've committed. But before we recite them, remember, God is a forgiving God. God is a forgiving God. And now you can recite the lists of sins knowing that, it's all going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Gail, yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. There's something that has been bothering me for years, and I'm still trying to work it out. And that is the beginning of chapter 34, when God says to Moses, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first. The word that's used there is pasal lecha.
Yeah.
Okay, which is the same root as idol.
Yes.
And they've just made an idol, the golden calf. And so when I first noticed this, I was absolutely shocked. What do you mean you're using the same word to talk about carving the Torah, the tablets of the Torah, which is so sacred? How is that possible? And so I've asked about this to a lot of teachers and, tried to read on it. And this is the conclusion I reached, that the word pasal is like neutral. And you can tell me if you think this is, a good interpretation, or maybe you have another one. It's neutral. It can be used for something good or holy, and it can be used for something sinful. And, it's just a neutral word describing the act, because I cannot make sense of, in other words, carving has the potential, this mechanical act has the potential for being used for good or being used for bad. Does that make sense?
Sure, that does make sense. I mean, the reason that pesel in Hebrew is an idol it's the classic sort of Hebrew root system working, is because an idol is something that is carved, right? That's how. So, but Gail, interestingly, maybe this will give you a little bit more to kind of chew on with this. Go back quickly, and we're going to wrap up with this because I gotta go back to the moment when the golden calf is made, which you can find it on 530, 531. So 530, this is Exodus 32, verse 2. The people are all, right, giving Aaron a hard time and rebelling. And so finally Aaron says, okay, take off the gold rings that are on your ears, wives, bring them to me. All the people took off the gold rings and brought them to Aaron. And then it says, Vayikach mi'adam vayatzar oto becheret v'ya'asehu egel masecha. So vayikach mi'adam, he took them from their hands, in other words, the gold, vayatzar, and he really like created, right? Vayatzar oto, and he created the gold, bacheret, in a mold, v'yasehu egel masecha, and he made the egel that way, the molten calf, masecha. So the word pesel is not used in that passage. And there's there's no carving there either, because it's a process of smelting and reforming metal. Nevertheless, when you get to the language of the Ten Commandments, it is pesel that's used there, forbidding idols. And it's an interesting connection. It's an interesting connection. The golden calf creation, it always seems. And Aaron later, when he's trying to explain himself to Moses, kind of says it this way. I put the stuff like into the pot and a golden calf came out. It's kind of what he's like. I didn't know. I didn't mean. I just kind of, that's how it happened. Like I didn't do anything. It's almost like a kind of a less intentional process than sitting there with a chisel and a hammer and carving it all out. Judy, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Can you explain to me why the shards of the broken tablets were saved other than God had written them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense that Mazel Tov, new grandchild for the kings, new grandchild.
Wow,
Yay!
Finally.
Shabbos baby, wow, Shabbos baby, Chol Hamoed baby.
Is it a girl or a boy?
Is it a girl or a boy? Girl. Baby girl. A lot of girls in the King family.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Another singer.
What's that?
Another singer.
Another singer.
I'm sure, of course. It's a requirement, it's a requirement. Judy, what was the question again?
It was something about
Shards.
Saving
the
the
shards being
Oh,
saved.
yeah. So I think that it conveys a sense of the holiness of the object, that it's sort of like, even though it's not functional anymore, it's the holiness of it is such that it can't be thrown away. It has to be preserved. In a way, a little bit like Geniza. We don't throw away like Sidurim and Chumashim and Tefillin, and that we take them and we in a sense preserve them by burying them, ultimately. But you can't just cast them away and throw them into the garbage. It's a little bit, Judy, like that old T-shirt that you have in your drawer, from the Journey concert in 1982 or whatever, and you never wear it.
20-year-old etrog.
Or a 20-year-old etrog, right? Like this thing right here. That you never wear the T-shirt, but you can't throw it away because it contains all of this stuff, memory and a sense of place and things that
we
bring
are
meaning
sentimental people.
Yeah. There's a wonderful midrashic tradition about the broken tablets, which is worth investigating. And Harold Kushner wrote a very beautiful book about that midrashic tradition. I can't remember the name of the book. If you Google Kushner, it will come up, and it's about it's about the idea that we all have broken tablets, And we need to carry our broken tablets because it's only by doing that that we can truly grow. It's a lovely idea. All right, folks, I got to run.
Can you,
Wonderful, wonderful class. Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a
very
great
first question,
Shabbat.
Rabbi, really quick.
Yeah.
This is really quick. This is a dumb question, but Simchat Torah is Friday. How come we're not like at the beginning of the very beginning of the Torah?
Torah reading wise, well, we would be at the end. We're at the end, Patty, right? Because
We are at the end.
yeah,
Almost.
we are, and we are. Yeah, so Ha'azinu and Vizota Bracha are the last two parshayot in the Torah and Deuteronomy. There's always a weird Torah reading pattern that develops toward the end of the cycle, because of like when holidays fall and all these other kinds of things. So like today, for example, we're reading, not from the cycle. We're reading in Exodus because of the Chag. But this afternoon at Mincha, you would be reading Vizota Bracha. I mean, rather Ha'azinu. Vizota Bracha, which is the last parsha in the Torah, is never read on Shabbat. Never read Shabbat morning. So in that way, it's not part of the full lectionary cycle, but it is read on Simchas Torah as the completion of the Torah is marked. And then the following Shabbat after that would be Bereshit, beginning the cycle again. Yeah. All right, folks.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat